In the last decade, there has been no one in WWE more controversial, no one more polarizing, no one more talked about than Roman Reigns. From being a beloved part of the Shield to becoming the most hated figure in the company even when he wasn't supposed to be, all the way to going on the run of his career as a fantastic heel over on SmackDown. It's been a long and rocky road for the big dog, but one that fans haven't been able to take their eyes off of nonetheless. So join us today as we take a deep dive into his entire career journey so far in Head of the Table, the Roman Reigns story. Lady Joseph Anoa'i was born on May 25, 1985 in Pensacola, Florida. As a member of the legendary Anoa'i family, which also includes the likes of the Wild Samoans, Yokozuna, Rikishi, and of course, The Rock, it seemed like a given that the young lady, or Joe as he was known to his friends, would get involved in the wrestling business. As it happened though, this wasn't his first passion, and instead he got heavily involved in football instead, playing for his school teams at both Pensacola Catholic High School and Escambia High School. And after moving on to college at the Georgia Institute of Technology, he became one of the star players of the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets too, proving his skills on the field. But this, as it turned out, would only be the prelude, because from there, he would move on to the big leagues, initially going undrafted in the 2007 NFL Draft, but later being picked up by the Minnesota Vikings, and after that, the Jacksonville Jaguars. Sadly, his runs on both of these teams would be a bit of a blowout though, as for a variety of reasons, he wouldn't actually see any time on the field. He would, however, have better luck when he moved over to the Canadian Football League in 2008, getting signed to the Edmonton Eskimos, where he would play with them for a full season. Still, as a man of high ambitions, Joe wasn't satisfied with the level of success he was finding in football, and so decided to retire at the end of that year, choosing instead to move into the family business as he began training in pro wrestling. By 2010, his natural physical attributes and his family lineage even helped him get a foot in the door with WWE, who signed him up to a developmental contract and sent him over to Florida Championship Wrestling to get some seasoning from there. In FCW, Anoa'i was initially rechristened as Roman Liaki and would make his debut on August 19th of 2010 in a Battle Royal, from there having the odd TV appearance before getting his first real program, as he and tag team partner Donnie Marlowe challenged Calvin Reigns and Big E Langston for the FCW Florida Tag Team Championships later that year. And though Roman would be unsuccessful that night, he would continue to be a prominent member of the roster, and one who was clearly already being groomed for bigger things in the future. In fact, by January 2012, he was able to pin the, at the time, FCW Florida Heavyweight Champion Leo Kruger in a non-title match, further establishing himself as one to watch. After that, he would face his future Shield teammates Dean Ambrose and Seth Rollins in a #1 contendership match on the February 5th edition of FCW TV. And though he would win that match, he would ultimately fail to win the big one the following week, instead settling for a second run with the tag team titles, this time with Mike Dalton soon thereafter. Behind the scenes, however, big changes were coming, as FCW was about to be folded into WWE's new developmental system, NXT. And this meant that all FCW alumni, Liaki included, would move over to NXT in August of 2012. And this was where he would be rebranded again, this time as Roman Reigns, a cool and cocky villainous character who made his debut on the show by beating CJ Parker on October 31st of that year. Any thoughts of an extended run on the black and gold brand was cut short though, because Roman, now with a new main event level gimmick, was handpicked by the company to be a part of the Shield, a group of outlaw-like figures who would begin invading WWE in late 2012 with the intention of bringing justice where there was none. And this invasion began at the November 18th Survivor Series, where Reigns, alongside Ambrose and Rollins, ran in through the crowd during the main event between CM Punk and Ryback to attack the latter, triple powerbombing him through the announce table and leaving him for dead. In the weeks that followed, the Shield would become the most dominating force seen in WWE for years, and while they were initially semi-aligned with Punk, this would eventually fade into the background as the group took care of business on their own terms whenever they saw fit. Now, we've talked about the Shield's fantastic run in detail over on our Jon Moxley and Seth Rollins videos, but at the risk of being repetitive, we can't underestimate just how perfectly those three men were booked between the end of 2012 and the spring of 2014. During that time, the company were able to do what so many have criticized them for not being able to do anymore, and that was make three bona fide superstars who remain main event figures to this day. And while during those early years it was Ambrose who was portrayed as more of the group's leader, Vince McMahon already saw Reigns as his next guy, and given his relative inexperience, carefully protected him by putting him in a series of 6-man tags with his other, more established teammates where he could let them do the bulk of the work and come in at the end to perform the big man power spot. As well as this, being on the road with Ambrose and Rollins ended up being an excellent way to help Roman develop more quickly, and the three evidently developed a close brotherhood during this time, often acting as a unit backstage. Yes, it was the perfect way to debut the big dog and make him feel like the ultimate badass as, let's not forget, in those early days of the Shield, he was cool, and fans everywhere fell in love with him as the silent heavy who took no prisoners. And of course, the Shield's run would see them go undefeated for their first 6 months on the roster, and even after that, losses would be doled out sparingly as they steamrolled through the likes of Daniel Bryan, Kane, John Cena, Sheamus, and Randy Orton. By May 19th's Extreme Rules pay-per-view, Reigns and Rollins were even able to become tag team champions after beating Team Hell No in a tornado tag match. This, combined with Dean Ambrose's United States title win around the same time, meant that the stable were dripping in gold, something that only went further towards making them feel like a dominating force. By August, a new wrinkle would be added to the group as they began working as assassins for hire for the villainous Authority, helping them to try to take out the likes of the Rhodes brothers, a situation which would lead to one of the best WWE matches of that era, as Cody and Dustin were able to beat Reigns and Rollins at October 6th's Battlegrounds. That blip in the road aside though, the Shield continued their path of destruction for the remainder of 2013. By the turn of the new year though, there were hints of dissension among the three for the first time, and this was only furthered at the 2014 Royal Rumble, when all of them entered the titular match, only for Ambrose and Rollins to be eliminated by Roman, who himself would eliminate 12 people that night, breaking the previous record held by Kane since 2001. And while he wouldn't win the Rumble itself, he would be the last eliminated by Batista, much to the chagrin of fans in attendance who had decided to reject the whole thing after it became clear Daniel Bryan would not be in the match. Given the response he would get at the same event just a year later, it's interesting to look back on this night and see just how much fans were behind the big dog. Sure, this was partially due to them not wanting to see Batista win, but nevertheless, it was still a period where Roman was considered cool. Back with the Shield though, the issues they were having continued for the next couple of months. It's been said that the plan at this time was actually to break them up. However, seeing that there was more that could be done, all three men went to their bosses together and pitched that they remain a stable for the time being, something which was eventually agreed to. And with their unit now secure, the group turned babyface for the first time in March of that year, attacking Kane and disassociating themselves with the Authority. This led to them beating Kane and the New Age Outlaws at WrestleMania 30, and then getting into a program with the newly reformed Evolution immediately thereafter, as the two stables had a couple of absolute classic matches at May's Extreme Rules and June's Payback pay-per-views, with the Shield winning both. And by this point, with WWE readying Roman for the position of top guy more and more, he was moved into the leadership position for the Shield, often acting as the spokesman during promos and generally feeling like the nucleus of the group. As well as this, in real life, he also got married and had his first daughter, Joelle, around this time too. Yes, all things looked to be going good for the Hounds of Justice, so it came as a shock then to fans everywhere, where on the Raw following Payback, Seth Rollins turned on his teammates and joined forces with the Authority, severing the brotherhood between those three men in the process. After this, Reigns and Ambrose would remain aligned, however, would largely go on their own separate paths as the latter seeked out his revenge against Rollins, while the former moved on to a program with Randy Orton, one which culminated in a match at that year's SummerSlam and saw Reigns get the victory. It was clear by now that the big dog was being fast-tracked to the world title picture, and this hadn't gone unnoticed by fans who, somewhere around this time, began to develop an animosity for WWE's new favorite toy, with the general feeling being that while he had a lot of potential, he was still way too inexperienced to be at the level the company saw him, especially given how over his former stablemates Ambrose and Rollins were. On top of this, there was also the perception that fans were being told who their new hero was, rather than getting to choose this for themselves, leading to much resentment. And this fan resentment only festered more as the year went on, with the whole thing boiling over at the 2015 Royal Rumble, where Reigns was clearly being booked to win the whole thing and then go on to challenge the, at the time, WWE Champion Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania. Fans could see it coming a mile away, of course, and things were only made worse when Daniel Bryan, who had been out for most of the past year with injury, announced his return to the ring just in time for the big event. This gave people hope that WWE would learn from their mistakes the year prior and give Bryan the big Rumble win. Of course, that didn't happen though, and the rejection of the main event turned out to be even worse than last year's, as the leader of the Yes Movement was eliminated from the match early on, only for Roman to come out soon after to a chorus of boos. Clearly, the company were worried that this might happen because they'd even gone to the trouble of bringing in Roman's cousin The Rock for a cameo at the end of the match, with the hopes that this would get the crowd on his side. But alas, it wouldn't work, and after the Big Dog eliminated Rusev to win the Rumble, The Rock held up his hand with a quizzical look on his face as the cheers were poured over them both. This kind of rejection of a top babyface was pretty much unheard of in WWE. Even John Cena hadn't gotten this kind of reaction. So Vince McMahon was left with a problem then, and in the lead-up to WrestleMania 31, he tried his best to fix it by taking a personal hand in the writing of Reigns' segments and promos, something which only made matters worse, as the once stoic badass was now being written to sound like a budget Cena, all bad jokes and cheesy promos that made him look like an absolute geek in the process. Come WrestleMania on March 29, 2015, however, the company were still sticking to their guns and planned to have Reigns be the one to finally topple the Beast and win the WWE Championship for the first time. Fearing a huge fan backlash at their biggest show of the year, however, they decided at the last minute to make a change, instead having Seth Rollins come out during the match to cash in his Money in the Bank contract and win the whole thing, something which was met with much anger from the Anoa'i family, many of whom were backstage that night waiting to see their kin win the big one. And while this decision did allow fans to go home happy and save the company from an embarrassing situation, it did little to quell the fan rejection of Roman, with this only continuing to get worse as the year went on. Even if feuds with The Big Show and Bray Wyatt proved that the Big Dog was improving leaps and bounds in the ring every week, it seemed the die had already been cast on him. And so when he finally won the WWE title at a one-night tournament at December 22, 2015's Survivor Series, beating his old Shield teammate Dean Ambrose in the final, crowds let the company know how they felt, and it wasn't good. Once again anticipating this though, WWE decided to try and get sympathy for him by having his first reign end after just 5 minutes when Sheamus cashed in the Money in the Bank contract and stole the title away. From there, even Vince was brought back as an on-screen character as he revived his old villainous Mr. McMahon gimmick, acting as an antagonist to Roman. And this worked, for a little while at least, as when the Big Dog pinned Sheamus for the gold on the December 14th episode of Raw, the live crowd cheered the moment. Yes, it seemed as if the company had finally managed to get their new top guy over as a babyface. However, this would turn out to be fleeting, as by the 2016 Royal Rumble, audiences were once again booing him following weak booking in the lead-up to and during the match. The plan to combat the boos on this occasion saw WWE put the belt on Triple H in the hopes that he could get Roman over in a one-on-one match at WrestleMania 32. However, this didn't work either, and when the former Shield member ended that night in front of WWE's biggest live crowd ever holding up the WWE title, fans wanted nothing to do with it. Following this, the new champion continued to struggle with fan reactions over the next few months, all despite having some pretty good matches against the likes of AJ Styles. So when Seth Rollins returned from injury, primed to be a mega babyface, and attacked Reigns at May 22, 2016's Payback pay-per-view, it looked like the time had finally come to turn the Big Dog heel. Sadly though, this did not happen, and WWE decided to keep fighting the audience instead. They would be forced to take the belt off him, however, when he was hit with a 30-day suspension following a wellness policy violation just a month later, this shaking Vince McMahon's confidence in him as a top guy enough that once he returned, he was not immediately shoved back into the main event picture. No, instead he lost clean to a debuting Finn Balor, then spent much of the rest of the year in the United States title scene as he feuded with Rusev. By December, he was somewhat back in the company's good graces, challenging the at-the-time Universal Champion Kevin Owens for the gold. However, this ended up merely being a placeholder program designed to keep Owens busy until he could lose to Goldberg a few months later. Still though, for as hesitant as WWE were to give him the world title again and face another fan backlash, they clearly wanted to keep him as a main event player, so they did the next best thing and gave him a WrestleMania match against The Undertaker, one which Roman would even win, becoming only the second person to beat the Deadman at the Showcase of the Immortals in the process. Unfortunately for him though, the match was terrible, and having him go over Taker only served to anger fans more, who went on to rain down a chorus of boos on the big dog for a full 10 minutes the next night on Raw in an attempt to stop him from cutting his promo. Backpedaling again then slightly, WWE kept Roman in the main event, but tried to appease audiences by having him lose a number of high-profile matches throughout 2017 against the likes of Braun Strowman and Brock Lesnar. Then, at September 24th's No Mercy, the company tried to quietly pass the torch to him by having him beat John Cena on a B show, but fans still saw through this too. It was clear by now then, there was only one way to get Reigns over with fans, and that was to reform the Shield. Yes, in October of that year, Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins, and Dean Ambrose came back together once again to take down the Miztourage, or at least that was supposed to happen until, like every Shield reunion thereafter, a curse seemingly fell upon it as right before the match, the Florida native was removed after contracting the mumps. After that, the Shield 2.0 did finally come together again in the ring, but by January of 2018, it was clear that the company felt comfortable going all the way with him again, as at WrestleMania 34, he would challenge the Universal Champion Brock Lesnar once more, this now being his fourth attempt to coronate him as the man at the Showcase of the Immortals. On that night, however, to the shock of many, Lesnar ended up retaining after Vince McMahon had another last-minute change of heart after fearing the show ending with boos coming from the audience. Still, it was only a matter of time now, and at August 19th SummerSlam, the big dog finally toppled the Beast to become the champion for a fourth time. Yes, it looked like WWE had made their decision whether fans liked it or not, and that Roman would reign at the top of the mountain for some time to come. It came as a shock to everyone then when on October 22nd of that year, the champion came out to the ring and announced to the world that he was vacating the belt, as he had been diagnosed with leukemia, an illness that had first struck him during his days as a football player and had now tragically returned. Instantly then, he went from being the most hated figure in the industry to the most beloved, as real life came crashing into the world of WWE. Soon after, fans and performers of every wrestling company out there poured out well wishes to him while Reigns spent the 4 months off TV battling for his life. And by February 25th, 2019, he returned to the ring to give an update on his condition. He was in remission. This was obviously met with a huge ovation for the live crowd, who were thankful he was going to be okay. And so it seemed like, given the circumstances of the last few months, Roman would now be a babyface for life, and the audience cheered him accordingly as he returned to the ring to face Drew McIntyre at WrestleMania 35. Then in April, he was moved over to SmackDown full-time, where he feuded with Shane McMahon for a while. Unfortunately though, this feud wasn't well received, and it wasn't long before Reigns was receiving disinterested reactions once more. Of course, they weren't actively booing him now, but it was clear that fans still weren't sold on him as the top guy, and so they simply chose to not cheer by and large. It seemed like that was the best WWE could hope for then. While Roman was clearly a very talented performer and charismatic guy when allowed to speak in his own voice, the company's creative team, as well as their scripted promos, had done such a number on him over the years that it looked like he was damaged beyond repair as a babyface. So, when the big dog pulled himself from the planned main event against Goldberg at WrestleMania 36, after concerns about being in the ring during a global pandemic given his immunocompromised state, he subsequently disappeared from TV for the next 5 months, choosing to instead stay at home and self-isolate. He wouldn't be seen or heard from until August 23rd SummerSlam, in fact, at which time he made a surprise return during the Universal Championship match, acting in a way that felt almost heelish. And as the weeks went on, he would cement this by siding with Paul Heyman and formally turning heel, finally giving fans what they had been asking for. And what a great decision this turned out to be, as for the first time, Reigns truly felt like the top guy, as he morphed into the Tribal Chief, a mob boss-like character who owned the ring every time he was in it, as he quickly regained the Universal Championship that was once his. Following that, he had one of the feuds of the year with his cousin Jey Uso, and has continued to be the best thing about WWE throughout the latter months of 2020 and into 2021. Yes, it's been a remarkable turnaround for someone who many assumed was too tarnished to succeed at this point, but here he is, proving them all wrong with some of the best work of his career. So good is he as a dominating heel, in fact, that it seems likely that when fans return, the big dog will probably get more than a few cheers from them. Whether the company will try to turn him face again at that point remains to be seen, but either way, it looks like he's finally reached his potential. And given that his upcoming WrestleMania 37 triple threat match against Edge and Daniel Bryan is easily the most anticipated bout on that card, we expect to see him reign as the top star of the company for years to come still. Well guys, what did you think of the video? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, as well as follow Wrestle with Andy on Instagram and Twitter. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.